All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Good evening, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your host.
I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
How's it going?
that was a little weird. We said we were going to switch off and do...
yeah, that's right. And then I was just like,
oh, and I kind of ended my my introduction right there. I'm sorry.
You know, it happens. It happens. It's all right. I was telling Dave right before we got started, I caught a quick unexpected nap just a few minutes ago. So it took me a second to even realize what was going on. So, here we are now, but we're ready to go. And this week we decided to watch the movie We Need to Do Something. This is a movie that I had not even heard of really before we got going. Like I just happened to stumble across the trailer. I don't know if it was on YouTube or Hulu or what, but I just stumbled across the trailer and sent it to you.
And I was immediately on board. You sent this and I was like, we have to do this on Shiver.
Yeah.
It just, I mean, the trailer's fantastic, and it's so timely. It's so topical. My understanding is that this comes from a novella that was written before the pandemic, but this obviously drew a lot of inspiration from COVID and the pandemic and the whole, shutdown, being closed in with your family, and it played to something that I think is really important right now.
Yeah, and Max Booth III, the guy who wrote the screenplay for this, is also the author of the novella, so he adapted his own book into a movie. I have not read it. Like I said, I'd never even heard of it before we saw this trailer.
Do you think you will read it moving forward?
I'm interested to read it because as we're going to get into, there are some avenues in this film that I'm interested to see if they were explored differently or even more deeply in it. And I mean, in a novella, that's a weekend read if you're doing stuff, a night read if you got nothing going on. So I'm interested to maybe check it out.
Excellent.
You're doing. I'm doing even. You're doing odd, even, odd, even, odd.
Oh, was I odd?
Yeah, you're odd. I said I would do even.
Oh,
right?
My bad. Shit. I'm all off. I had such a crazy day today, and there's no excuse. I'm sorry. Hang on. Let me just take another sip. And now we're good again.
Hey, all right.
So like you said, this came out of nowhere, right? And I think you can find it only on Hulu right now. I'm not sure if you can find it elsewhere, but the fact that it is on Hulu makes this something that's really accessible, which is important, I think, right now. So it's something that anyone can sit down and they can watch. And so that said, it is something that you and I were able to watch very easily, right? What did you think of this movie as a whole? And was there anything in particular that really worked for you, or anything in particular that really didn't?
So this movie, I really had no idea what to expect to it coming in. When you watch the trailer, you got this idea that it was a family that was trapped together. When you go to watch the movie, you find out that they're actually trapped in a bathroom together the entire time, and there is very little to no explanation as to what's actually going on outside the bathroom. So they kind of quick synopsis: family rushes into the bathroom. They hear storm sirens. There's a tornado coming or something. They go into a bathroom. They see a bright flash of light, loud noise, and realize that a tree has fallen outside the bathroom door and they're now trapped in there together. So it's a family of 4, mother, daughter, father, son. And they are in honestly, a decent sized bathroom. It's bigger than either of the ones in my house.
It is massive. And they do give you a view of the house from the outside, and something just doesn't add up with that bathroom, which I don't know if that was intentional, and it's kind of like, okay, well, this house kind of exists in some sort of limbo state, right?
Yeah.
Because that bathroom just doesn't match. It doesn't match the architectural style of the house from the outside,
which is a beautiful prime
mid-century design. Yeah,
Brady Bunch architecture.
Yeah. It was really, really nice.
Very much a Mike Brady designed house.
And that bathroom just, it doesn't match, but even the size of it, like it doesn't make sense. Kind of like in The Shining.
Yeah. So they're trapped in this bathroom, and then, hijinks, for lack of a better word, ensue. It was very interesting to realize that this entire movie takes place inside the bathroom, short of, I don't know, if the movie's an hour and a half long, and if you add together all the flashback scenes, there's maybe 10 minutes there. This movie,
I think that's pretty generous.
Yeah. This movie exclusively takes place in this bathroom. But when it was all said and done, it was an interesting ride. There was a lot of fun to be had in this movie. There were some scares. There was a lot of unexplained things. It was interesting kind of going through and reading people's reviews today and seeing, while it's not really divisive, it tends to just kind of ride a middle line, or people don't like it. It was interesting because while I didn't think the movie was a masterpiece, I did think that it was a lot of fun to watch. And it did kind of have me gripped up. And part of that is because during that 2020 lockdown, when we couldn't leave the house, I was going insane. And I had an entire house, and I was crawling walls. My yard has never looked as good as it did as those 6 weeks when I had no work to go to, and you didn't go to the grocery store and stuff like that. It was just, and so that idea of just 4 people being
the
trapped
Amazon
in one
boxes kept coming.
Yeah, they did. And it wasn't even for. What's funny is I see the word claustrophobic kicked around a lot, and for me, it wasn't even that, because to me, the size of the space isn't necessarily a factor in how creepy or awful it can be. It's just the fact that it's the only setting. My brain doesn't have a mode where I can just be in one setting like that and be okay. And so that constant atmosphere left me always kind of wondering where they were going to go with it. They did a good job of, a couple of times I thought I'd see where it was going to go, and it would kind of swerve me a little bit. It was pretty cut and dry in the parts that made sense. Were pretty cut and dry. The parts that didn't make any sense, that we're going to get to, those weren't, and they came very much out of left field, and some of them I liked, some of them I didn't, but overall, I thought it was a fun ride. I did enjoy the movie.
I wish I had. And this is the second week in a row where we're kind of on different wavelengths, but doesn't happen often. And we're in fact on the same side as we were with Candyman last week.
Yeah.
Where you mostly enjoyed Candyman and I mostly didn't. I do think last week when we reviewed the new Candyman, there was more good than bad. I definitely think there's more bad than good here. When you were talking about those reviews where they either kind of rode that line of, hey, this is pretty cool, but it's not the greatest thing ever, or they were just, kind of derided the movie. And I'm kind of sitting on that camp. I think that there's a lot of potential here that went untapped. There's I think a lot of that comes from the fact that this movie has an identity crisis. It doesn't exactly know what it wants to be. Is it a movie about a family that is writing out being trapped during an awful event, or is this some sort of supernatural witchcraft, demonic end of the world sort of thing? And the only explanation that there can be is that this is some sort of witchcraft thing.
Right.
Because if it isn't, the movie makes no sense.
Correct.
But even if it's a movie about witchcraft and these two girls brought about the end of the world, right? There is so much that is left unexplained. I've talked about this before. I think that a certain amount of mystery is a good thing. You don't need to put everything on exposition, right? You can hint at things. You can kind of just say, hey, research this if you want, right? But there has to be at least like ground rules. There has to be a field for which you to play this game. And I feel like they're playing a game with rules that haven't been written yet.
They're playing Calvin ball.
Sure. Yeah. It's just to me, they played fast and loose with what exactly was going on. And they play. What was interesting was I guess I can say most. No, not even most. Two of the actors were very good.
Yes.
And one, through no fault of his own, I think was okay, which was the younger brother.
Yes.
The love interest was okay. She was, neither here nor there for me. Didn't really do much in that department. And then one was absolutely awful. To the point where I was getting vibes of the only bad actor in The Night of the Living Dead, the racist father.
Yeah.
Right? And that's exactly what it felt like for me. So even if you're looking at this as like character study, where it's like, this is what happens when people are locked into a confined space together, I don't think it really worked, because every time that the father said anything, I was immediately sucked out of the movie.
Okay.
And I think that there's ways of playing drunk. There's ways of playing a person, dealing with withdrawal that are valid and have like a sense of verite to it. And this didn't have that. To me, it was just overacting to the extreme, where you have the subtlety of Vanessa Shaw, who it took me until like 20 minutes into the movie that she was the girl I had always fantasized about from Hocus Pocus.
Yes. She
yeah.
absolutely was.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, wow, now I can fantasize about you as an adult. That's fantastic. And the daughter,
Sierra McCormick.
Sierra McCormick, who I think did a spectacular job. And I saw her in American Horror Stories over the summer, I think it was, and she did a fantastic job there too, again with material that wasn't exactly stellar. So I think all in all, this is a mixed bag, where the bag is mostly unexplored material, and that leads to me very often feeling like, should I check my Instagram?
Fair enough.
And to me, that's the litmus test to whether or not a movie or a TV show is any good. If I'm constantly going on my phone and wanting to see cute pictures of dogs, then there's a problem with
too much black licorice in the jelly bean mix for you in this one.
There you
Yeah.
go.
And it's fair enough because you're absolutely right. This is a movie that it never establishes an identity. This is a movie that doesn't really know what type of horror it wants to be. It experiments. When it first started, I'm watching this movie and I was like, oh man, we haven't done like a solid atmospheric horror movie. That was the thought I had 10 minutes into it. I was like, this is a movie where the scariness is just the situation that you're in. This is great. We haven't done anything like this. But then it quickly kind of starts jumping ship, and you've got this a story of witches, kind of demons, maybe. You're looking at maybe it's a monster movie. You start to get a couple of Cloverfield vibes, or you're always wondering.
I did get a Cloverfield vibe.
You start to wonder. So you're monsters, witches, demons. Like I said, atmosphere. It never really figured out exactly what it wanted to be. It felt like it was pulling inspiration from things that were as different as The Craft. And Gaio movies, which we've talked about in here, because there are some scenes where it's like, okay, I can think of a couple stellar horror movies that scene would fit into. But you're right, it was all kind of piecemealed together. So for a movie that never really established its identity, how does that sit with you? That that they kind of just jumped around so much and never really knew exactly what they were after.
Early on, it was very apparent that they were going for the atmospheric thing. And as a fan of old horror movies, I was on board for that because I am a longtime fan of Universal monster movies, of Hammer horror movies, of that sort of 1950s and 60s school of horror, where it's all about atmosphere, very little in the way of jump scares and gore, and it's just the situation that's scary. I think one of the greatest horror movies of all time is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and as much as I love the remake from the 70s, which definitely goes into that body horror realm. That original, with very little in the way of traditional scares, manages to be so damn scary because of its atmosphere, right? They start building towards that, except that they turn that on its head.
Right.
With the introduction of the witchcraft, which at first you're not really certain if this is for real, right? Is Sierra McCormick's character, Melissa, is she just assuming that she's bringing this on, right? And this is all in her head, in the same way that many of the other characters are dealing with their own lives while they're trapped in there. But as soon as that question is answered and there is no more mystery, the movie becomes considerably less interesting, because now we are aware that this is a supernatural occurrence that is going on here, right? And so therefore atmosphere has nothing to do with it anymore.
Right.
There's nothing that atmosphere could possibly scare when you are being stalked by some sort of supernatural creature.
Yeah.
Right?
No, you're right, man.
So
did a lot.
For me, the first real scare doesn't occur until 35 minutes in. And I was expecting something, because one of the things this movie did do well was it did build tension well. But I think it just didn't know when to pay off.
Yeah.
So when you finally do get the payoff, it's great. And the scene where they're asking, who's a good boy to the dog outside, right? I was expecting something to happen.
Right.
I didn't know what was going to happen. But when the dog responds and says,
Ozzy Osbourne,
I'm a good
by the
boy.
way.
Was that Ozzy?
That was Ozzy Osbourne. Like when I was watching the credits, I was like, it's a good boy, Ozzy Osbourne. I was like, good boy. I was like, oh my God, the demon dog thing was Ozzy Osbourne. That line, I'm a good boy.
I knew he was in the movie. he was credited as being in the movie, but I didn't know where. And I
Yeah.
thought it was just that, errant reference to, the bat biting incident.
Yeah.
I was like, they have to credit him for that. That's odd. So that's really cool. And that scene was spectacular. It
Yeah.
was so good, and the payoff was really there. And I thought, oh, okay, this is the turning point in the movie. This is when we start getting that supernatural horror, and they're really going to start to scare us here with what they're going to put this family through. But they didn't commit to it. What they continued to do was more of the psychological, we're trapped in this room together, and that is no longer scary. Like, I'm not afraid of my dad. I'm not afraid of my mom when there's a monster outside whose tongue I can literally rip out of its mouth. It'll wiggle around in the sink for a while.
Yes.
And it'll continue to stalk us. Like, you're no longer scary. There's nothing you can do that will scare me more than that monster. So to me, that sort of non-committal attitude to its style absolutely destroyed any potential that this movie had. It had so much of it early on, and had they kept some of that mystery around until later and let that payoff come at the end, I think that this would be a very different conversation.
Yeah, the type of the horror type switching, the non-establishment of identity, that didn't really bother me in the way that it did you, because it was one of those things where it kept me from getting comfortable. When I was watching it, and then when I thought about it afterwards, I kind of sat into this space of feeling like when they decided to do this, what they wanted me to do was never be comfortable. After we saw the tongue ripped out of, what we're just affectionately referring to as the demon dog outside, you're right. You get into that headspace of like, okay, now it's a monster movie. Right. So now I'm ready for scares. And then they go back to but also people can be terrifying and awful. And so it kept me uncomfy, which is an interesting feeling to have, especially when you're right. You get into this headspace of now I'm going to be scared. But then what they would do is they return you to that space of not knowing. And that's what I was saying was a couple of times in this movie, I felt like it was going to go right. It went left. Every time I felt like they had established something, they they would veer off of it a little bit. Honestly, one of the things about this movie that I disliked was one of the very few things that was established. And that was, I really didn't like the witchcraft angle of this. And you used a phrase when you were talking about your overview, just playing very fast and loose with it. I didn't, it was kind of this like, it was like this propaganda pamphlet version of what witchcraft can be.
Yeah.
And I didn't like that, down to the fact that Melissa McCormick's girlfriend, Amy, she was this very she was this late 90s teen drama goth girl, which is just, it's fine. And it's an aesthetic that people use and pull off. But last week we used the phrase on the nose. It was too on the nose. You can have a character that is a girl who is a recovering cutter who is into witchcraft, who doesn't necessarily wear combat boots and the razor blade earrings and all that. And I get that she's a foil.
But can you? Because I don't know. And certainly the costume designer in this movie doesn't know that that's true.
And so I get that she's a foil to this, this bubblegum haired Melissa McCormick. And so they're this weird, they're this cute, little her and me couple, and, opposites attract type thing. But it was just, it was too on the nose. And like I said, it reminded me, it was like, when I remember watching The Craft, which I referenced when I was bringing this up, and you watch The Craft, and that was a really well done idea of how to present this aesthetic without overstating it. And I mean, this made the costuming in the craft look like, I mean, the girls of the craft were just out for brunch, right? Like they're just typical moms out.
But the craft is also interestingly like a product of its time.
Yeah.
And also like influential on its time. So it took what was already popular dress and popular fashion in the 90s and made it witchcraft.
Right. Whereas
and then that in turn influenced the way that people dress. So like the craft was one of these incredibly influential movies, whether or not it's a good movie aside, you know, I mean, because I think it's an enjoyable movie. I don't know if it's a good one, right? And this one didn't do that. And it just said, oh, what was it that she wore in the craft? Yeah, let's do that.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like Amy's wardrobe was like every trope of a teenage witch, you know, that this costume designer could think of. And so I didn't really like that. I didn't like that, you know, and I don't know, this is part of this isn't, and I guess there's a cautionary tale here, right? About, so what they do is they cast this, they're making out one day, and this kid from their school videos it, and they make some really weird offhanded reference to deep fake porn. So I guess
he never explained.
Which I guess, like I said, that whole angle that was a downside for me. So I guess that this kid created, like, put their faces on some porn and like released it out around their school or whatever. They cast a spell to try to get him to shut up, to stop talking shit, is what they keep saying. And he ends up choking on his own tongue and he dies. So they go about casting a spell that they found online, and it, you know, brings about the end of the world. That's
another thing that kind of bugged me.
It felt so slapdash to me, like that part of it.
If Amy
did not, yeah, like if Amy is a character who genuinely suffered from you know, walking corpse syndrome, where you walk around convinced that you're dead. She genuinely suffered from that. She, you know, all of a sudden, you know, takes it upon herself to cast a necromancy spell to bring herself back to life. You know, it's just, I don't know. There's something unnerving to me about somebody who is presented as a character with a deep respect for what they're doing, but is so
not enough respect to actually research.
Right. Just so abhorrently bad at doing it. Like, she's presented as this character who has this, you know, decently deep knowledge of what she's doing. And, you know, she knows the medical term for the walking corpse syndrome. And she's, you know, she had all these ideas, and you know, the concept of necromancy spells isn't exactly Wicca 101. No. You know, so
that's a deep cut.
Yeah. So there was obviously the thought put into figuring that out. But then this idea of just like I said, just a quick, oh, well, I found this spell online and it's going to stop the end of the world, or, you know, it's going to stop what we started. That whole witchcraft angle felt real slapdash, and it's just like, okay, we need, like, we've got this idea for this family that's locked in there, and there's something apocalyptic happening outside, but we need something that caused it. And just that element of the story,
and I didn't really enjoy. I do have a very, very weak counter argument to that. It is possible that Amy is not who she said she was all along, and that she was using Melissa as a way to bring about the end of the world.
Which is possibly hinted at in the very final scene.
It is, right. The final scene kind of hints at this, right? But because it's merely a weak suggestion, because of one image that we are given, an image that is explained no further than the image itself, right? It's like if I were to tell you, what is this? And you have never seen this thing before, right?
Right.
There's no way for you to know that this is a pen, right? For the listener at home, watch the fucking thing live so you can see me hold up a fucking pen, right? That's that's what that was, so is it possible that she was using Melissa? I think it's possible,
Right.
but
And that whatever was inside of her that she brought back was still, inside of her and controlling her at that point. Like I said, that was the one part, like, of the many things that they explored, right? The atmospheric horror element of it, like I said at the beginning, that was terrifying to me. So living here in Alabama, we do occasionally have a storm where we have to close ourselves in a bathroom together. And honestly, my kids are 11, 10, and 4. You don't want to be in a bathroom with the three of them for 10 minutes, let alone multiple days. So already I'm like, all right, yeah, this is creepy. This is just a completely off the wall thing. There was one moment where they've been trapped in there for a while and they're like, oh God, we're all so hungry. We have to eat. And the first thought that popped in my head was, yeah, they're right. I should put snacks in the stuff that we get together when we have to get in the bathroom during tornadoes.
That's dadding, man.
We always get our stuff together, right? I'm like, all right, I got my boots here. We got bike helmets for the kids. Okay, if we got to go in the bathroom, everything's ready. Never once I've been like, let me put snacks in there in case we're trapped for days. Now that's in my head forever. But so the atmospheric horror element of it, I liked that a lot. I really did enjoy that. The bizarre family drama of the neglectful, possibly abusive, but he does say, have I ever hurt you? Or are you just worried that I'm going to? The alcoholic, neglectful father, the mom who's having an affair, I guess, or at least has decided who she's moving on with after she leaves her husband. That family drama part of it was interesting, and I honestly, like, we talk about not having to be told everything. I think that the family drama part of it that was there, we were given just enough to put the pieces together.
I agree with
I
that.
thought they did a good job with that. I loved the dad, like, constantly having to stave off the DTs, like starting off drinking the mouthwash, eventually like sucking on the alcohol wipes until the ethanol or the isopropyl or the ethanol or whatever actually made him go blind.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but I kind of loved it. I liked the maybe monster angle, where you hear the automatic machine gun go off and something attacked the guy. I liked all of the elements and felt that they were kind of placed in there just the right amount that I enjoyed the kind of trail mix type movie that we got. But of all the elements that were there, that whole witchcraft angle, I don't know. It didn't feel, that was the part of the movie that didn't feel fully developed to me. It felt like they started with a good idea of what they wanted to do with it, and kind of reached a point where they were, then suddenly the writers weren't 100% sure how to proceed. So it all just became very tropey. And that part I didn't enjoy, but the rest of the, not being able to establish identity, I was mostly okay with that because it did keep me uneasy. It's, the only monster that you actually see is a rattlesnake. And that rattlesnake ends up playing a huge role in the movie. And that's also very interesting when you're presented with this idea of witchcraft and some sort of apocalyptic event and a supernatural monster outside, a demon dog, but then also the snake that gets in, just the plain old rattlesnake, is just as deadly as any of those things. That ends up becoming this really weird and cool element to me too. So I did kind of like how they just threw all this shit in the gumbo pot and said, let's see, what kind of scary movie comes out. And I'm just going to pick around that witchcraft angle a little bit when I eat it. I'm going to be all right.
What's interesting is I didn't consider the snake as a monster until you mentioned it, because I only ever saw two monsters in this movie. Good Boy. And the father. Those were the only two monsters that I recognized watching the movie. For me, the snake was more to go back to like middle school literary analysis. That was man versus nature, right? And I guess that can be a monster unto itself, but each one of them suffers due to the father, whether it be the mother's spirit completely being demoralized, whether it be the son dying from the snake bite at, pretty much the hands of his father,
Yes.
or or the daughter being completely, dead to the world, and being not much more than that walking corpse that Amy claims to be, and we could definitely tell that his parenting is a part of that, right? She says when Bobby's, when Bobby's dying, he says, "And where was Dad when I was at the hospital?" She says he was drunk in a bowling alley.
Right.
So she's been coping with his alcoholism and his whether it's abuse or just neglect, right? She's been coping with it for her entire life. So I saw him as the big bad.
Oh yeah, no, without a doubt. I 100% agree with you. Like when we're looking at the monster movie angle of it, he is absolutely presented to us as a monster in the movie. I just also, like I said, when you throw the rattlesnake in there, and yeah, it is just a result of the things that happen, but it does become an antagonist that moves the movie forward and, kills one of the characters. So I'm checking the rattlesnake in the monster box too.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you've got me there. But it does bring to me, now that we're talking about it, the acting, right? Since we're talking about the dynamics with the characters, right? It does kind of seem like there was this sort of, hey, do what you want to do sort of thing going on here, because there was no one school of acting going on. It was kind of catch as catch can, and and what we've got is what we've got, right? So do you think, as you put it, in the show sheet, right? Do you think it was a smart choice to allow this dealer's choice method of acting? I think that's a good way of putting it.
It's interesting, right? We've spent many episodes of this show talking about the great directors that just draw these amazing performances out of their actors. We've talked about being floored by Ari Aster, being able to go out and get these people and get them all on board with doing the same thing. Stanley Kubrick is legendary for his directorial, iron fistedness is what I'm going to say. And these are all people that we've done. When we're looking at this movie, and so Sean King O'Grady being the director here, it really, it was spray and pray with these actors. He was just like, hey, what are you good at? And and he goes to the actor who's playing that. Was it Pat Healy? Isn't that his name? Yeah. Pat Healy. Mm-hmm. So he goes to Pat Healy and he's like, all right, what are you good at? And he's like, man, if I were in this situation, I think, and I were this alcoholic dad staving off the DTs, I'd be over the top nuts. And he's like, all right, cool, go with it. Right. And so, and he goes to Vanessa Shaw and he's like, all right, well, what do you think? If you were in this situation and she's, I would shut down and I would become that person who just has to keep rowing the boat. And I would try to keep my family together and everything's going to be okay. All right, cool. Go with it. And then Sierra McCormick doing this just really, closed off, really, isolated, maybe this is my fault. There's so much going on here with the acting. And you said at the top, and I think that you nailed it. I think Sierra McCormick did an amazing job. I think she did. I think that she portrayed this quiet teenager with the looming guilt of her family falling apart and maybe the end of the world weighing on her very heavily. And I think she did an awesome job with that. I think that Vanessa Shaw was amazing. She really was. I loved watching the way that she bent and bent and bent until she finally broke. And then when she delivered so amazingly when she had finally she couldn't put up with the dad anymore. And I mean,
Don't
when
you ever talk to my daughter that way again? It was fucking great. Yeah.
And then the actor who played Bobby, sure, it's like, hey, play a little kid who's scared, you're comforted by your mom, cool. That one's not take it, that one's take it or leave it. Doesn't if the character had an effect on the movie, I don't think the acting one way or another was going to make that character any better. Pat Healy is the interesting thing here. There's part of me that really wants to say what I got from Pat Healy was so insane that it was laughable and unenjoyable. But there's part of me that really wants to be like, you know what? maybe it is possible to go that crazy. And I don't know that it is. I don't know that it is. We don't, the one thing about this movie was that they never actually kind of allow for any sort of substantial knowledge of how much time has passed. We occasionally see them sleep, but not often. We know that they've got running water, so you can't gauge it based on how dehydrated they are. People can go 2 weeks without eating.
That is also something that doesn't make an awful lot of sense. If the house is structurally compromised and their pipes have been burst by this tree, just crushing the house, right? They would not have running water.
Or power, which they
or
also
power,
have.
yeah.
But
again, it's supernatural. So hey, fuck it. This isn't a Nerf dart. This is whatever. This is $1 million fucking dollars.
Yeah,
it's not a Nerf dart.
And so it's established they have running water. They end up even though it's disgusting, we know that they eat the tongue out of the demon dog, right? So they've had some food. So we're never sure how much time has passed. And so I keep trying to nail down how I feel about Pat Healy's performance, because part of me wants to say it was awful. Part of me really wants to say it was awful. Part of me wants to say that this guy looked at Jack Torrance and was like, I can do that, but better. And just went nuts with it, right? But the bigger part of me knows that this was a guy who was let off the leash and just didn't know what to do with that much freedom. I think that the performance that we got from Pat Healy in this movie was the definition of being given enough rope to hang himself. Mm-hmm. I think that he was given a lot of license and a lot of artistic freedom, and he was never reined in. And it didn't suck me out of the movie like you said it did for you, but it did start to take away from the movie. Like, I cuss a lot, not in front of my kids, but I do cuss a lot. But I do like to think that even while going crazy, I've never had the DTs, but I do like to think that while going crazy and possibly going through withdrawal, I might be a little more able to put together sentences that weren't just fuck you, you motherfucker, fuck, motherfuck, fuck, which is pretty much all he said. Like, unless he was bad mouthing someone in the room,
cunting motherfucker,
yes, like it was just like that particular one. I really wanted to find a way to like it, because I know even on this podcast, one of the things that that people usually tend to not agree with me with is I don't like Nicholson's Torrance that much in The Shining, because I feel like it's so overacted. And so I did try to step back from myself on this and find a way to like Pat Healy's dad in this. And it was funny, but it wasn't supposed to be funny. And I guess that's the problem, right? So there were a lot of great acting performances here, but man, he did just kind of manage to shit the entire bed.
And the problem when you shit the bed is, if it's a solid stool, the other side of the bed more or less stays okay. Stinks a little, but the sheets are clean on that side. He clearly had some 3-day-old Taco Bell.
Yeah,
because he shit the bed so bad. I think you were onto something there, where he was given enough rope to hang himself with. I think it reminded me a lot of Eric Freeman in Silent Night, Deadly Night, and a lot of what Eric Freeman has to say about his time on set is that he was given no direction. And if we look at Sean King O'Grady's IMDb page, there's he's got a not inconsiderable number of producer credits, mostly in television, some short film, some documentaries. When it comes to directing, though, he's done like an episode here or there of a TV documentary series or of a documentary film. But this is the only feature film he's directed. And I think that says an awful lot about what we got on screen, because we have two seasoned actresses, one in Sierra McCormick, who's been acting for years, even though she's very young, and one in Vanessa Shaw, who, as I stated, I've been in love with since the early 90s when I saw her in Hocus Pocus, right? They were awesome, but they know their craft, right? And so when you have actors like Bobby, who, maybe he doesn't know what he's doing yet. He hasn't quite found himself yet. I'm looking at the woman who played Amy. Let's see. What's she known for? She doesn't really. Yeah, she's got 6 acting credits to her name, so she hasn't really done much either. She's just breaking into the industry now. Pat Healy, he's got some acting credits, but I think that he was going for something wild, like you said. The impression I got was that he was going for a very Nicolas Cage-like performance and hoping to get Nicolas Cage-like results. The problem is that Nicolas Cage has an ethos, has this like credibility that he's established as an actor, as a human. I guess he's human, right? Possibly, yeah. That like we see him and immediately buy into what he's doing. There's something, he's got a charisma about him that you're immediately in, right? In the same way that on a totally different level, you're immediately in with Tom Hanks, right? So Pat Healy didn't have that. You have neither established yourself as the type of person who is going to give that sort of performance, nor do you establish it throughout the film, because he runs hot and cold, right? Normally hot, sometimes cold, and when he's a little bit more reserved is when I was like, oh, okay, that was an interesting scene. But in the end, for me, it was so bad that it ruins the film for me. I mentioned Night of the Living Dead. There's an actor there that really, really overperforms. The material, however, and the rest of the cast is strong enough, I think, to carry this movie. But when you're really only talking about 3 other actors, and 2 of them of consequence, like you said, Bobby is more or less an inconsequential part of this movie, right? He serves the purpose of being the point in the movie that brings mother and daughter together and splits father, daughter, and wife apart, right? He's a MacGuffin. That's he is nothing more than a MacGuffin.
You're absolutely right.
Unfortunately, and there was really great possibility to have awesome interaction between him and Melissa, but really the only thing that's established there is that the mom was a great mom.
Yeah,
you could have done that without him. So for me, the acting was, I don't know if it was a lower point than than style, but Fuck, man. I could not get into it. And
Yeah.
it's really unfortunate because, like I said, Vanessa Shaw and Sierra McCormick fucking knocked it out of the park.
They really did. And it's interesting that that, like I said, we were given such a wide variety of things, and that's what we keep talking about, right? There's just this variety, the type of horror, the acting, it continues to be a mixed grab. But one thing that that can be stated pretty definitively is that what it lacks in substance and in reveals, we do get a decent amount of scares and gore in this movie. There's really only one death, or no, two deaths, excuse me, that we see. That we see two deaths. We hear possibly one off screen. But we do get a good number of scares and we do get some gore. So when you're looking at the scares and the gore, what stands out for you as good scares or as great effects? Things that, even though you stated, you're not a fan of the movie, what are the things that when you do remember it, if you've got to talk fondly about, you're going to talk about?
So I don't think the special effects were good. However, the scares when they happened were great. And I can think of two that really stand out. And unfortunately for me, they were the only two that really did much. There's that first one, which I mentioned, comes 35 minutes in. It's building up to the who's a good boy, and the dog is licking him. And as Melissa's got her hand out, right, and they hear "I'm a good boy," and I mean, the fact that you're hearing any voice at all is terrifying. But the fact that it sounds the way that it does, and they've got that booming bass on it, it's reverberating. Now that I'm finding out it's Ozzy, it's even fucking scarier, right? Because Ozzy, I fucking love you. You are one of my gods, but you're one of the scariest motherfuckers in the world, right? Like that's terrifying. And the fact that she is getting like pulled through the door, I was uncertain if she was going to get her arm ripped off
Right.
at that moment, when she finally pulls back and you see that there's something in her hands. That moment again, just I was on the edge of my seat there. And I very rarely am on the edge of my seat, right? I will sometimes like sit up, but this was like full on, like my arms were on the armrest. I was up, I was leaning back just before the scene. I was leaning back and eating Frosted Flakes right out of the box. Like if I was back in college, all right? And you know why you eat Frosted Flakes right out of the box when you're in college, right? And I dropped that box and I was sitting up on my haunches like, what the fuck? I was looking at no one because there was no one sitting next to me. And I was looking at the no one next to me saying, can you fucking believe this shit? It was that good. It was an absolutely incredible moment. And then they take this thing and they throw it in the sink and it's a fucking tongue, right? Now, this is, again, where I think that the movie kind of suffers. There's clearly very little budget, right? I don't think the effect of the tongue wiggling around in the sink was particularly good. I don't think it was particularly bad, but it was not a good effect either. It only pulsated in two places. And I realized that it like movie David was saying, oh, well, that's an animatronic, right? And you don't want to think that, right? Now, I was happy they went with that instead of CG, because for me, watching, even if it's puppeteering that's going on, it's like, oh, that's a fucking tongue, right?
Yeah.
So there was some of that went in there, and I was like, oh, okay, props that you went like the real special effects route, and you didn't like CGI that thing in. The second one was the snake biting Bobby. That scene, again, I like flung out of my seat, right? I mean, at that point, I kind of figured something was going to happen, so I did gently place the box of Frosted Flakes down, and I was prepared that time. And that was an incredible scene. Because of, again, that buildup, that tension that I was mentioning earlier, that O'Grady is able to build just before these scenes. He is able to build that incredible tension where he's just, the father's just smashing his head into the door jamb, and I was uncertain if he was just gonna fucking crush his skull
right
at that point. And then once the mom comes in, finally, she finds, the wherewithal to come in and be like, unhand my son, not without my daughter, sort of moment. And she puts an end to it. That's when, for me, Melissa really wakes up. And she realizes that she's got to do something in this situation. She can't continue to think about Amy. Amy's not there, right? She can't continue to think about, this is my fault. Like, no, I've got to act in the moment. I got to do something right now, right? And she jumps into big sister mode. And I think she did a fantastic job. And the way that she reacts to the snake going for him, and in fact, the way that shot, I think, was really, really great, with the camera really down low and the snake slithering. Yeah. And again, they used not a real snake, but they used a real puppet or animatronic or whatever it was to clamp down on Bobby's arm. It was a great, great scene. And that was a truly effective scare. And knowing that this is certain death for him, that was a moment where you don't often see children die in horror movies.
Yes.
It's like one of the cardinal rules: you don't kill kids. And when it happens, it's always like, oh fuck, I can't believe they broke the rule. It better be worth it. And in this case, I think it was worth it because it was a turning point in the narrative. Even if I don't think the narrative was that good, it was a turning point in the narrative. It was meaningful for the movie, in the same way that it was for Halloween in 2018. For me, those were the two major scares. As far as special effects go, I got to say, I was kind of let down, particularly as far as like close-ups go. I mentioned the tongue, but I think also when she's stabbing her father at the end, the way the blood spurts out is just comical. And I was thinking like, okay, so he really was like a cartoon character all along, right? It's like that Who Framed Roger Rabbit thing.
Yeah,
it's like not just any tune, that's why he bleeds that way.
I did notice the blood spurts, but I was going to throw in, as far as effective scary kills, minus the blood spurts, which I did notice, that kill was very effective to me, just because that was one of those ones I could feel. Like, I've cut my hand on a broken mirror before, and it hurts like hell. Like, if you have never cut yourself on broken glass, it's not like getting cut with a knife where it's just a sheer edge that slits you open. Like, you feel a million shards rip you open when you get cut with broken glass. So when she grabs that piece of mirror and just starts stabbing her dad in the back, before I noticed the comical blood spurts, which I absolutely did notice, I was in this medium here where we're describing kind of where we were. Like, my shoulders were back because like my entire back tensed up because I could feel what I could only imagine it must be like to be getting stabbed over and over and over again with this giant piece of broken glass. And so, yes, the blood spurts were a bit much, but I don't think, to me, they didn't kill that moment as far as being an effective scare. Also, what's really funny about that particular one, you've talked a lot about the tension building to these really great moments. What's really effective to me about the getting stabbed in the back with the broken mirror kill is that it comes as a release to a scene that was unintentionally comical, maybe. I don't know. So the snake gets after the snake bites Bobby, they trap it underneath the trash can and they've got the toilet lid on it. Well, while they're scuffling later on because he decides that he has to kill his daughter, kill the witch. They're scuffling and the trash can gets knocked out. The snake gets free. It bites the dad. So he scoops it up, bites its head off, and spits it out. The absolute depths of his insanity. And so at that moment, I'm like, all right, I get it, right? It was the metal reference to if you see a gun in Act 1, you have to use it in Act 3.
Right.
If you if you reference biting a creature's head off in Act 1, you better bite it off in Act 3. And so he literally bites the head off this snake and spits it out. And I'm like, all right, it's kind of funny, but I see it, right? The guy's gone crazy. But then he turns the snake into a whip. And he's whipping his wife with it, and she's pinned up against the wall and screaming, and it's not supposed to be funny, but damn it, it's not. It's just, there's something funny to me about somebody getting whipped with a snake. I'm sorry, I don't know that that to me that the weight of that scene was not delivered in what I believe the director had in mind when he started doing it. And so the sudden burst of her running up and stabbing him in the back, going from something that to me was so cartoonish to this very real visceral pain of being stabbed with broken glass, was a stark cold shower for me, because I was in like, it was a really heavy scene, but just because of the way it was delivered, I was in this really light headspace after biting the head off the snake and whipping his wife with the snake. It probably shouldn't have been, but I was like, okay, this is weird. But then, like I said, it's just this stark contrast of like, okay, yeah, that was comical, but you know what? Getting stabbed with glass, that's real. And that's pain that you can feel. So that one really stood out for me. And then what I think they wanted, the one other one I'm going to throw into the mix here is the scene that I think they wanted to be the standout scene from the movie, the one that people were going to talk about, unfortunately, is the scene that didn't deliver. And that was Amy showing up at the very end of the film. Maybe the cuts all over her arms start bleeding. Rad, right?
That's a cool effect.
Yeah, great effect, right? And I was like, oh shit, yeah, we're gonna find out that she is the demon or whatever. And then the weird tendrils kind of shooting out of her mouth and going into Sierra McCormick's mouth, and just like, I couldn't be scared in that moment because I was so utterly confused that while graphically it was a decent scene, I think it went from a great scene when her arms were bleeding to just an okay scene when the tendril shot out. It got real choppy. It didn't look amazing. And then it just suddenly disappeared. And then it was just a what the fuck scene. And
there's no reference to it later.
Right.
There's no visible change in Melissa.
And so I feel like they wanted that to be this really keystone visual element in the movie that people were going to talk about. And I feel like the mark was missed there. It started off.
There is another earlier in the movie as well, where I think that O'Grady and Max, what was his name? The author.
Damn it. Hold on. I knew it. And then I had switched over because I was looking at Pat Healy's acting credits.
Max Booth.
Max Booth the third.
Yeah, I think that they kind of got together and said, well, I think these would make some really amazing images, right? And the other one was when Melissa was dreaming, maybe, and her, Bobby's corpse was already decomposed in the bathtub, and she tells her parents what's going on.
That one.
And that it's kind of replaying the first night, and then her body opens up, and we get maybe an homage to the chest burster scene in Alien, and all this blood is coming out, and her father is drinking the blood, her mother's drinking the blood, and it's all bathed in red. It's a beautiful frame.
Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah, it is
But it
framed
means
amazingly.
nothing. It means absolutely nothing.
Yeah, there is at no point any explanation for what the symbolism of her ripping open her stomach and the blood shooting out and why the parents would suddenly drink it. That there's and again that's a spot where you're right. Just the lack of reveals, is another one where this movie suffers.
Yes. I do think, however, as critical as I've been of this movie, there is one area that kind of shines, and I think it's the technical aspect of this movie, right? You put it in a way that I hadn't thought of to me earlier. You said this is essentially a bottle episode from a sitcom where you're working with a very limited space. Your camera, the blocking, everything is worked out so meticulously because you're working with that limited space, right? Because everyone has to manage to keep everything within the confines of that bathroom, right? How did this work to keep you intrigued?
So we talked about how there's a good size to this bathroom, for a bathroom, but it's still a tight space. And so the two things that I was constantly amazed by were, one, just how in depth the blocking and the positioning of these characters went. Like because there was such limited space, there had to be a great attention to detail with where everyone was going to be for a shot to be effective. And I think that they pulled that off really, really well. I feel like there were a lot of times where somebody was just barely in frame or just kind of out of focus, and those things were done amazingly. The camera, the cinematographer of this movie, his name is Jean-Philippe Bernier. I'm going to assume is how you pronounce that last name. He definitely knew what he was doing, because not only do you have a small space that you're working with, but you have a small space with a huge mirror in it, which is also going to make it harder to get the angles that you want to get, because now you're limited on where you can be without crew and the camera showing up in the mirror. And that was a feat within itself. There are plenty of times when you can watch a high budget film and occasionally catch a camera in a mirror. It happens. It's just something, you get used to. There's a part of me that wants to watch this movie again and just keep an eye on that mirror and see if we ever see the camera in it, because I was halfway doing it this time through when I realized that this was the only space we were going to be in, and it was not that large. They did a great job with shooting this movie. For all of the highs and lows that this movie has, I think that the way it's shot was done beautifully. And I think there were some really great frames. Like you said, that scene that we were just describing, that scene doesn't make any sense. But it was framed so well, with the parents just kneeling down right beside her and her like on the step by the bathtub, almost like an altar kind of raised up above them. Those types of things.
And he's catching it in his thermos, almost as if it's a chalice. But it doesn't mean anything.
But ultimately it doesn't mean anything. But technically, that's a great scene. There's something else that I want to know if you saw today that I think is a bizarre directorial decision. So when I was reading today, at one, we talked about the dad trying to kill the witch. At one point in the movie, there's things are getting hectic, and all of a sudden you hear music start playing, and it's Putting on the Ritz by Taco.
Right.
And they realize it's her phone ringing, and he grabs it and he just starts talking to some guy. Whoever's on the phone tells him he has to kill his daughter. Okay, that's interesting. What's really interesting is I read multiple reviews today that said the song that played was Never Gonna Give You Up. And
I heard Putting on the Ritz.
Yeah. So I wonder if in the earliest showings of this movie, if they put "Never Gonna Give You Up" in there, because the number one comment that everybody thought they were so clever for saying was, "At that moment, I knew I'd been rickrolled for the whole film." And so I wonder if they went back and they were like, "That's not what we meant to do. We just thought it would be kind of funny to put it in there." Like, but now everybody's turning it into this whole movie was just a gag. And so I guess that after some of those reviews came out, they went back and they putting on the Ritz in there instead of "Never Gonna Give You Up"
for like a home release.
Yeah, which is an interesting, that's an interesting idea of a director or a film company or whoever made that decision, using the fact that this was a digital release and could be altered for the masses that quickly, and fix that so that there wouldn't be that complaint. So if that's the case, that was a great directorial decision to kind of, if there's something you can change that everybody's turning into a joke, to do it, because putting on the Ritz didn't come across as a joke to me. It did come off as, just like something, it's a weird, creepy song anyway. And so it was a way to lighten it up while keeping it creepy. And so I think it's a great decision to switch it from Rick Astley, if that's the case, if that's what they did.
I can't hear that song without thinking of Young Frankenstein. Because it's the tap dance number that Gene Wilder and Peter Boyle do as Dr. Frankenstein and his monster, who's now a man about town, as he says.
Yes.
And so I heard that, and I immediately started wishing I had watched Young Frankenstein.
Okay.
So although I don't think I was being rickrolled, I did long for both Mel Brooks and Frankenstein. So I think from a technical aspect, this movie is a well-made movie. And that's one of the things I don't think anyone can take away from this. It's well edited, it's well shot. O'Grady definitely knows what he's doing, and I think he hired the right people to work with as well, because like you said, the cinematographer Bernier, he's really good. A lot of those shots were very, very nice, and in particular, those two red tinted shots are just spectacular. And the editing there, it's an editor named Sean Patrick Ford. Really good, really good editing, I think, here. It's a shame that the final product doesn't reflect the amount of work that clearly went into it. I never enjoy taking a dump on something that people have worked on.
Right.
That doesn't stop it from not being good in my eyes. And you're always proud of the work that you do, and it's always work. And I think you can tell that here. Everyone involved in this production was firing on all cylinders, and that's something that, for me at least, gives this movie a full star. Whenever we get around to our rating, you can bet your ass that one of whatever unit it is that we are using will come from that, because it really is a well-made movie.
Right. And there were the two other just of the technical things, one being the very first, or not the very first, but when we get the title block, we referenced earlier when we were talking about atmospheric horror, we referenced Hammer, that just red letters on a black background that said we need to do something. And even when the credits rolled, that was very classic. I thought that was a great directorial decision. And from
the fact from like a rhetorical standpoint, to see the credits begin to roll over this like very suburban looking area, which is where many people in this pandemic were stuck. You know, they were
Right.
stuck at home. You know, that to me was a great stylistic choice. You know, which again goes to the technical prowess of this movie, which I think O'Grady's time as a producer and what he's done in the documentary world all helped with that.
And then the one other thing, and this was partially the writing, partially the acting, but there was something very visceral to me about after Melissa has killed her father and she curls into her mother's lap, and all she keeps saying is, "Have we always been here?"
Mm-hmm.
There was that moment, like and it was a little bit of everything. It was the great acting from both of the actors on screen at that moment. The directing of getting her to that spot, the way that was written, just everything about the way that it was just very barely scored. That scene to me was so good, because I remember like, wait, and not to the extreme of this movie, but like I said, 6 weeks of not being able to leave the house. Like, I remember days of waking up and being like, this is the only life I've ever had, is just mowing the grass and staring at Tiger King. Like, that's all the world's ever been, right? And
today is yesterday, and yesterday is tomorrow.
Today. Yeah, exactly. It's just so that scene was very, very powerful. And again, that just goes back to, that was one of those moments where everyone involved was firing on all cylinders.
Mm-hmm.
So it is that time when we get into rating the movie. And as if you are a new listener to the show, we would like to let you know that when we rate a movie, we only rate it against itself. That's why we create a unique rating system for each movie. We went through a couple of different things for this one, but if you've been listening, the one thing that we keep going back and we keep referencing is there's a scene where they rip a tongue out of a demon dog's face. I guess we never really see the dog's face. Yeah. But so when it came down to it, there was only one logical choice for how to rate this movie. So Dave, out of a possible 5 demon dog tongues, it could still be in the demon dog, it could be flopping around in the sink, your choice. How many do you give this movie?
I do prefer my demon dog tongues in the sink, well washed, before you start taking the tendons out to chew on. Very small pieces, because it is tough to chew but easy to choke on, as Vanessa Shaw says. I stated earlier, I think it might have even been in last week's episode, that a 2.5 is kind of like maybe you should see this movie, right? And a 3 is definitely a, hey, you should watch this movie. So for me, a 2 means you probably shouldn't watch this movie. It would have to be to someone who I know would more than likely enjoy this movie to recommend it. I don't know that 2 is low enough for how I feel about this movie.
Oof.
But I also don't know that 1.5 demon dog tongues is too low. Like, I think that might be too low, because the acting from Vanessa Shaw and from Sierra McCormick was stellar. The production value was there. But otherwise, I really can't recommend this movie. And I don't know that I can recommend this movie to anyone other than maybe someone who is like a theater geek, who like really appreciates that sort of black box theater style production,
Right.
So like, we're talking about a really limited amount of people that I would recommend this to. And even then, I would still have to face this person afterwards and say, you want to talk about this thing? So if I got to choose between 1.5 2 stars. I think I'm going to go 1.5 stars. I really did not like this movie. I don't see myself ever watching this movie again. In fact, I don't see myself ever talking about this movie again, except maybe if we ever watch another movie where Sierra McCormick is in. She does seem to really like, genre films. Miss McCormick, please continue to work in the genre because I think you were fantastic. Miss Shaw, you're awesome. Please call me. Otherwise, I just didn't really like this one.
Okay, fair enough. So like I said at the top, I enjoyed it. There was a little bit of everything. I tend to like things. That's not to say that I like everything. There are things that I don't, but this was a movie that never really had solid footing on what it wanted to be. This was a movie that left me with far more questions than I had going in. And going in, I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know anything about it. Like, why are they trapped? I had questions going in after the trailer. And it did leave me with more questions than answers, but sometimes I'm okay with that. I'm a Lost fan.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were some great technical aspects to this. There were some powerhouse performances from the 2 actresses in the movie. There was Ozzy Osbourne voicing a demon dog. There are enough positives here that I can think. I actually can. Josh Schneider, a friend of mine, listens to the show. Like, he's one that I can think of a couple people that I might recommend this to. There might be some caveats, tell me, look, it's not the greatest thing ever, but it's a fun ride. And that's kind of where I stand with this. I enjoyed watching it. I thought it was visually appealing. I thought it was interesting. It didn't keep me enthralled the entire time, but I did enjoy watching it. And when it was over, I didn't leave a bad taste in my mouth. So I am going to give it 3.5 demon dog tongues. I did enjoy it. There's a possibility I would watch it again. Part of it would be a hunt for some sort of subtext that maybe I missed. And to maybe
I venture to say you didn't, but but you don't know until you try.
Right. I'd venture to say that too, but I can see myself watching this at least one more time. I did have a couple of what the fucks and like good ones, and a couple of weird ones, but I liked it. I had fun watching it. I did. I liked it. So, it's going to leave us with the biggest gap that we've had so far between our reviews. But yeah, I'm going to go 3.5 demon dog tongues on this one. I enjoyed it. And yeah, it's going to be a limited number of people I'd recommend it to. I feel like once I get into 4 territory, that's when I'm just like, oh, I got a scary movie for you.
Yeah, watch this.
Yeah. 3.5 is going to kind of limit the scope on who I would recommend it to. But I would recommend it to a couple folks, and I did enjoy it when it was all said and done. So yeah, 3.5.
All right, there you go. So when it's all said and done, we need to do something. Gets a 2.5 star rating. If I've mathed correctly.
I believe you have.
I think I have. In fact, my calculator tells me I have, and that's why I know. Because otherwise I don't math well. I am a literature teacher, not a math teacher. So not even basic arithmetic. So so there you go. 2.5 flailing demon dog tongues. That's what we give. We need to do something. So I guess you'll just have to decide for yourselves. Because it is rather divisive here.
It is
on Shiver, a horror movie podcast. So
we want to say thank you guys for listening. And hey, if you listen to us on Spotify, did you know that you can now rate podcasts on Spotify. So if you listen to us on Spotify and you enjoy what you hear, if you wouldn't mind kicking us a 5-star review, we'd really appreciate that. It's right there on our homepage when you go to Spotify, when you go to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. Underneath, it's got a spot. If you have not rated us yet, it will say not rated. You can click it right there. Why don't you give us you don't have to leave a detailed review, but a couple stars are going to help us move our way up in that algorithm.
Absolutely. And while you're at it, check out some of the other Geek Bro podcasts, Geek Bro Network podcasts. Check out Mount Geekmore, which Daniel DeBona and myself are on. Just this week, we did a pretty cool one. Daniel was not on that one this week, but you will be on next week. Probably, yes. Hopefully.
Yeah. I'll be back now. The two sports teams that the Dolphins are out, the Braves won, and Bama lost. So I'm done with sports for a little while.
I'm done with sports for a little while too.
Just the foreseeable future.
Just for the foreseeable eternity. So so go ahead and give a listen to that one. Give a listen to What's Up, Bro. Seasons, a TV podcast, comedy fitness, a dose of Ellie, kick flicks. Make sure to get that punching in there. Crimacopia, our sister podcast. And I believe I got them all that time.
Absolutely. And you can head to geekbro.net where you can find all of those podcasts, including ours. Of course, if you're looking for us on the social medias, we are at ShiverPod. You can see it right over there on Dave's name. If you're watching us, we are at ShiverPod on Instagram and Twitter. Feel free to drop us a line in the DMs on those. Let us know what you think about the show. Of course, you could email us if you wanted to at shiverpod@gmail.com. It's checked occasionally, even though it's being a real bastard about letting me log in right now. We
still haven't figured that out, huh?
You keep giving me the code. I keep giving you the code. You keep saying it's okay. Gmail doesn't listen. We'll get to it.
It's not even asking for a code.
Well,
Weird.
Who knows? But anyway, make sure you reach out to us on social media. Let us know what you think about the show. And if you've got recommendations, we've got our January calendar full, but we are going to start filling that February soon. If you think you've got a movie that we either haven't seen or that you would like to hear us talk about, make sure you let us know.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here on Shiver, fright you very much.